So welcome everybody. My name is Katie Zontak. I'm the Cultural Arts Director at the JCC in Buffalo. And thank you for joining us tonight for our Jewish Poetry Reading Series. This is our fourth program, in our series. And we do have one more final reading in May. But we're really thrilled for our three poets that are joining us tonight. And I actually just get to kind of sit back and enjoy with all of you. And we have Baruch November, who will be kind of acting as our host this evening. And our other host that we typically have, Phil Terman, he will actually be one of our readers joining the group tonight. So I will turn it over to Baruch in just a minute. But I do just want to give a couple technical things for everybody. If I can ask that while our readers are presenting, if you can all just please stay muted. If you have any questions or comments that you want to share about the poetry while they're reading, you can certainly feel free to send it in the chat. And we will be ending with a short Q&A. So again, I encourage you, if you have any questions that you want to ask the poets at the end of the program, please go ahead and send those early on or whenever you come up with the question. We'll be going through those. And if you want, I know depending on how familiar you are with Zoom, right now you might be seeing a whole gallery view of all of our participants. If you do want to just focus on the reader, there is a button somewhere on your screen that says view, and you can go and you can select speaker view, and then that will just open it up so that you're just focusing on the person speaking at that time. So I will also throughout the program be sharing websites for our poets. So please feel free to copy those. You can go and research more about their poetry, purchase books. And I will be recording this program. So if you have to tune off early or want to share it with anybody, I'll be sending that out tomorrow. So I think that's my whole spiel. I'm going to turn it over to Baruch and enjoy the evening. Thank you so much.
Baruch, I think you're muted.
All right, start again. Thank you, Katie, and thank you to the JCC of Buffalo for hosting us. It's really a wonderful experience being able to present poetry like this. I want to get the night started by introducing our first poet. And that poet is Joan Larkin. She actually has exclusive, exciting news to share with us. Her new book, Old Stranger, which will be her sixth book, is forthcoming from Alice James Books in 2024. So that is definitely exciting. Pre-order it now, because according to Gerald Stern, may he rest in peace, like all great poets, Larkin is a master of poetic cunning, gorgeous language, and rhythm and tone so appropriate and precise. Moreover, Joan has no fear of any topic. Nothing is too complex, too dark, or too personal, making each poem full of insightful gems that should be mined by a world in need of change. Without a doubt, Joan Larkin deserves the spotlight. So here she is.
Baruch, thank you so much for that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Can everybody hear me okay, or do I need to get closer? It's wonderful to see so many dear friends here tonight. Thank you for coming, and thank you to Baruch and to Phil and Katie for all the work that they've done to create this series, and thanks to the JCC of Buffalo for having us. And I have to say, what an honor and a pleasure it is to read with Anne-Marie Macari and Phil Terman. So I'm going to set my timer so that I know what I'm doing here. Usually I forget until I'm halfway through. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay. I'm going to start with some poems from earlier books, and I'll read a couple of poems from Blue Hanuman. This is called Eye of Newt, and I think there's only one thing I need to tell you about, and that is there's the phrase torn from life is in the poem, and it doesn't mean life itself, but Life magazine, which is where I think my brother found and ripped out and tacked to the wall a reproduction of Picasso's Girl Without a Mirror. I'm not sure whether it was actually Life magazine, but that's kind of how I remember it. Poetic license. Eye of Newt. I was larval. I dreamed myself downstairs in PJs, still in my coma. Bach, he said, and I lay next to the radio. Dark amber spread through my girl brain. Eye of Newt already nestled there, an egg glued to a twig. My pale, bespectacled brother set me on a leaf and watched me fatten. Franz Kafka, he said, and my new long feelers brushed the wall. Girl Before a Mirror was tacked there, torn from life, her twin pear belly worm pink as my own. Half curled, half crawling, I burst through skin after skin. Art, I said, and my wings fanned slowly open. I'm going to read a short poem called Trough that was written after seeing a film about the poet Miklos Radnoti, who was killed during the Holocaust on a forced march. And outside of the, I think, what is it called? The Museum of Jewish Heritage is New York's Jewish museum. And that was where the film was shown. And there are these long rectangular flat fountains outside. And that's what the first image is about. Trough. Long block, black. I'm going to start again. That looked so weird to me. Okay, it's really there on the page, so I'm going to read it. Long block, black stone, the brimming slab, bitter red and copper seep into us, and into us the small notebook in his coat, still undissolved poems in bread-bought pencil, fused to each other with blood and body fluids in soaked dirt of a mass grave. And this last poem I'll read from Blue Hanuman, The Covenant, begins with a sentence in Yiddish, but the next line of the poem immediately translates it. So if your Yiddishkeit is not up to date, you'll hear the translation. A Stück Fleisch mit zwei Augen. I was a piece of meat with two eyes, an animal watching another animal. She fed, dressed, named me, flushed my waist, scrubbed my pink skin till it sang. The kitchen was hers, where the iceman's tongs pincered solid blocks, cream rose in bottles, inching up past the lip. Coal roared through a chute into the cellar. Unsaid, invisible, the weight she carried, cold and dense as the block the iceman shouldered, stung through his burlap rag. I lapped her scorn, answered her bitter call. She needed to eat. I was her meal. And I'll read two from my body, and don't lose your list, Joan. There it is. Okay. This is, oh, I already read that. Okay. Sorry, folks, this is the logistics here. Okay. I guess I'm reading this one. It's called Afterlife. I'm older than my father when he turned bright gold and left his body with its used up liver in the Faulkner Hospital, Jamaica Plain. I don't believe in the afterlife. Don't know where he is now his flesh has finished rotting from his long bones in the Jewish cemetery. He could be the only convert under those rows and rows of headstones. Once, washing dishes in a narrow kitchen, I heard him whistling behind me. My nape froze. Nothing like this has happened since. But this morning, we were on a plane to Virginia together. I was 17, pregnant and scared. Abortion was waiting. My aunt's guest bed soaked with blood, my mother screaming. And he was saying, kids get into trouble. I'm getting it now. This was forgiveness. I think if he'd lived, he'd have changed and grown. But what would he have made of my flood of words after he'd said in a low voice as the plane descended to Richmond in clean daylight and the stewardess walked between the rows in her neat skirt and tucked in blouse? Don't ever tell this to anyone. That's it. Okay, so I'll read some newer poems from the manuscript of Old Stranger. Fanny praised God, aleph by aleph, on the one page of her one book, signed her citizenship with X, pressed wells into dough with the heel of her hand, oil and salt her elements, well of onions her bread signature. She herself a well, 9 bodies from one, stood into her 70s, Oxfords, elastic stockings, satiny girdle to hold flesh in place. Just now, I saw her in my mirror, worn teeth and claws, old country eyes. Or did some stranger look at me with mercy, her wind-bent beach chair planted in rocks? Good. It is called Chain of Events. And the first line mentions being and nothingness, which you probably already know is Jean-Paul Sartre's great work. Chain of events. It started with being in nothingness and hiding a pack of Luckies in my school bag, tucking a matchbook in front without tearing the cellophane. I risked taking the streetcar downtown late at night. Did they never hear me? And basked in the gleam of Herb Pomeroy's band and the tang of underage vodka in orange juice. I quit sleeping in metal curlers, told everyone I was an existentialist, though I kept wearing my Peter Pan collar and gold-toned circle pin, almost right up to the night of the abortion. I gave up on the straggly page boy. I think that was part of what Mother meant when she screamed, "Where did I go wrong?" And so much about these themes of abortion, and this one has a reference to trying to get birth control before it was possible. This is the early 60s, but so much of this is in the news lately. I don't feel as out of date as I often do. 1961. What was I doing looking for help in the phone book, then walking up Prospect to the doctor's polished boat of a desk, that face the color of thin milk? I needed a diaphragm. Unmarried, his steel-rimmed glasses glinted. His satisfied look was a cat's. If I thought about anything then, it was how to make $5 feed us for a week, how to soak kidneys in vinegar to draw out smell. They had a bluish undertone, like the alizarin crimson Robert squeezed onto his palette to paint the thrift store wine glass. 39 cents a pound. Relief from tamale pie. Whatever he thought, he ate it and went back to his painting. The pregnancy lasted a few weeks past the wedding. What's still with me, the shape the doctor's mouth made in that dim office. Disgust. Nothing could leach it out of me. I'm still breathing its faint, unmistakable odor. Okay, I'm just going to make some quick, do some triage. Okay, this is called The Disappearance. I think I need to explain anything. Twice, Donald did something with his mouth I hadn't seen before. Old baby grin. His eyes locked on mine as the joke lawyer ran down ifs, if nots, we hope nots, billable. Which Dickens he was, I don't know. Heap or Tulkinghorn, or nothing more vile than flat eyes and a tight tie. Donald was mute, his mouth making the strange smile as he walked his stick down a steep street. Gin on an empty stomach, and he was out, mechanically shoveling in haddock. 3 times I asked, "Are you okay? Can you hear me?" And his hand poked fries into his mouth. Speechless black hole, I wish were fiction. It's actually sort of, I never explained this, but there's one of the personal resonances of that last line is that my older brother, my late brother, was a science fiction novelist, and he was a hard science fiction writer, not a fantasy writer, and black holes were one of his interests. So fiction about black holes turned into something else in the poem. I think I'd like to read 2 more. And this is called Fanny. No, I already read Fanny, right? Okay, so how about Singapore and then White Pine? Singapore. Ice clouds rose in a glass. A ghost mushroom floated in clear broth. Eel-streaked pillows of eggplant like our flesh. The marina darkened under its gemstone necklace. A flash turned a child rising from the pool, fungus white. Many-mouthed quiet, Malay, Mandarin, Singlish, Tamil. I hardly know where I am, tasting green Cambodian fire, opening a hinged valve to its scar, swallowing silk. white pine. Walking to the studio, cane printing the dirt. I see you rising from a thicket, ragged ferns at your foot, deep grooves in your bark, around you a cloud of needles. High on your trunk, 2 moons like scars of sheared off breasts, where the chainsaw whined and sap oozed from the wound. Below them, a dark, articulate slit, dead and living in one body. Your cones open in warm air, give winged seeds to the wind, enough for a forest. Death poem, wait. Joan, keep walking. Thank you.
I'm gonna let her hear the clapping. I like to use those reactions, you know. Where are they? There we go. Thank you so much, Joan. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
So Baruch, how you doing? Are we doing all right so far?
I'm doing great.
All right, everybody okay? We having fun yet? I think we are. Thanks so much, Joan. It was wonderful. I'm going to introduce the next poet. I'm very, very, very honored to introduce Anne-Marie Macari. And so we're so delighted to have both of you here. So Anne-Marie, as you may know, is the author of 5 books of poetry. Her first book, Ivory Cradle, won the 2000 APR Hahnemann First Book Prize, and not a bad way to start, chosen by, and this is even more amazing, Robert Creeley. Wow, okay. In his introduction, Creeley wrote, quote, "The wonders here are those of perception, intuition, union, separate all these emotions provoke. Anger and despair, but also joy. Love in its flooding recognitions, relief in the world's insistence, substance." Anne-Marie's wonders didn't stop there. About her second book, Gloryland, Toni Hoagland, notice the quality of the poets that write about her poetry. Our wonderful Toni Hoagland, may he rest in peace, writes, "Macari's powerful poems make poetic speech seem an utterly natural act." And about her third, she heads into the wilderness, published by Autumn House Press. Jane Mead was moved by Anne-Marie's blind love for the world. Again, poets we love agree about Anne-Marie's most recent books, Red Deer and Heaven Beneath, her most recent book, published just a couple years ago. Listen to Ross Gay when he says, "A book that has its hands reaching out to you and its soul reaching into the earth." Anne-Marie is also the recipient of the James Dickey Prize for Poetry from 5 Points magazine, and has edited with Carrie Salerno, Lit from Inside, 40 Years of Poetry from Alice James, which has won an amazing wide range of enthusiastic kudos from a whole list of poets, and just putting together an anthology of 40 years must be an amazing task. So let's just say that Anne-Marie Macari's poetry is expansive in its celebration and investigation of how the earth interweaves with the spirit, and we need her more than ever as a witness. Her poetry investigates the underbrush of knowing, as Toni said, for she is aware that we are, as she understands deeply in her important, really great essay, The Lyric Impulse in the Time of Extinction, when she says the depression or general despair, the horrifying concern for other species, for her and our species, haunted by our cultural and religious belief in our superiority over with whom we share the planet. Particularly, she goes on to say and write, as one example, the exile of the feminine from our cultural life, an extinction so widespread we hardly understand the consequences, and just makes really amazing insights in that essay. So what's Anne-Marie's answer? The lyric, poetry. In her poem, What Will You Feed Me, which I absolutely love, she writes, When the complete comes to find me, the one question will be, what did you feed them? Clearly, one substantial nourishment Anne-Marie has fed us all along with is poetry. So let's allow Anne-Marie to feed us a portion of her lyric morsels.
Wow, thank you, Phil. That is an incredible introduction. I forgot about that essay. I have to go back and look at it. And Joan, that was a stunning reading. Thank you so much. I love those poems so deeply. Thank you for inviting me. And Phil and Baruch and Katie, I'm really honored to be here. So I am going to start with some poems from Heaven Beneath, my most recent book. And then I'm going to read some new poems. Okay. So I'll start with this poem Tidal, not title, but a Tidal. Okay. Briny flats and mist, a water world tilting empty, then full, now empty again, with its sucking music, barnacles that hiss along the waterline, seaweed and milkwort exposed. What a boggy sponge we stand on when we're not balancing on the cobbles, when we take to the starry moss spread across the sea meadow, aiming for the green tree line. Something's urging me down out of myself into the dark drink of peat, brown roots, gray sand, urging me to crouch in the grasses like a snail or a cluster of berries. I'm the one who knows how to leave on my own without saying goodbye. I hold the ryegrass in my hand, stroking its braided head. I want to take my shoes off. I want to make it to the tree line, reach my hand inside. This poem takes place in Florida, and Pete wrote it, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I always knew about my Italian heritage, and my mom's family always said that they were English and Dutch. And actually, they're Irish. They were hiding. My grandmother hid the fact that she was mostly Irish. So this starts off being about that, narrow and winding. All night searching backwards till I found her on the ship's log, Margaret Fair, servant from Ireland during the famine. All night, DNA boats lighting my bloodstream. We got up early to drive to Florida prairie and arrived with sun brimming with green swollen spikes of saltwort around our feet, birds going silent with the light. I wanted to draw that meadow into my blood, to take it back to Margaret on the boat. I wanted to remember what I couldn't know. Field of green succulents, you entered me, your secrets. Tell me we're not apart from one another, that the sea prairie flowers in me. Tell me you know me, that I will return recycled vapor to rain and back. That I am vapor adrift over a salt plain, draining into a brown bog, that my ever after is to be broken, dispersed, swaddled in algae, sucked into muddy roots, washed down, drawn up, narrow and winding path, devouring insects heard me through slick air, calling me into the fold. When the rains come. I dreamed earth was a pebble inside a mouth. The stars were teeth in the maw. I dreamed I walked in circles tossed around. Am I worthy? No. Yes. No. A flood of shame soaks me. I go back to the beginning. A pebble rolling, a mouth in a mouth in a mouth, back to a beginning and sucked through the dark, curled up, a grain in the dark. When the rains come, I'll be, wash me, wash me. I'll be the one ready to shed my skins. When come the rains, I'll let go my feathers, failures. Arms out, I'll be, wash me, a silver note going clear. In rain, rain, in the mouth of the pebble going clear. One more from this book. We will all go home with you. As a child, picking through blackberry thickets, through underbrush and thorns, I thought we were all together, but you weren't born. I filled a pail with fruit, scratched my arms in that dense and stopped to place the black orb on my tongue. Far into time, my mouth a place of sight and a purple black unrolling inside. I heard the door while trees leaned overhead. We will all go home with you through brambles and weeds. That is what they said. Okay, I'm going to read some new poems. And these are about my brother who died at the age of 24, so almost 40 years ago now. And he died from a gun accident, if such a thing is really an accident, if an adult having a gun accidentally can kill themselves. But that's the story. So a warning, these poems talk of gun violence, obviously, and the sickening scourge that it is in our country. My brother tells me of the slamming door. That first Christmas of my death, I thought maybe you of all people might hear me. I stayed near, hoping I could tell you it was an accident, a stupid joke. I longed to make amends, to explain how there's no magic in death, only how fast it came, then the saturation of grief soaking me, the living trying to haul me back to mother, to father, to mother, father. Not meant hurting them, not meant dying. The earth summoning me, busy streets of the old neighborhood, yards full of plastic and metal, and beyond that, webs of trees like intermediaries, lifting and bowing, humming, moaning, me wanting, I don't know what, not my body, not that, but something. Sister, I never saw the door opening before it slammed shut behind me. I only felt a sharp breeze, a gasp escaping flesh, a smell of sorrow. Not then could I speak. Not then could speak I or cry out. And with no understanding, I crossed over. The title of this next poem is Amerigun. Amerigun. What is it now? Almost 40 years? Don't think I've always missed you. Sometimes I've forgotten you, you and your Ameriguns, the ones Dad found in your apartment after you died and dumped in Powell's Cove. Why? When you told me you'd learned your lesson. But there are no lessons for Ameriguns, only more Ameriguns. They reproduce like rabbits, LOL. Ameriguns, we give them to toddlers. We loved the troubled boys to have them for Christmas, Americans under the tree, all wrapped and waiting to be loved. And you, accident, carry your American into the next life. You use it like an oar to ferry you over. Use it like a metal straw to drink your milk. It's a telescope when you hold it to your eye. Amerigun with the extra chamber you forgot about didn't empty as you emptied the others, as you joked about shooting yourself, as you shot yourself in front of your friends. Your lover, Amerigun, whispering in your ear, hey baby, just try me out, I'm so hot. Amerigun edging your scalp, that's Amerigun for you. Good night. This is only, I read a few of these once before. Most of these I haven't read before. When I read them the first time, I kind of, as is my wont, I was a little self-deprecating and said that they were unhinged. But, you know, I'm not the one that's unhinged. It's the incredible, sickening culture of guns that's unhinged. The gun enters the room where you died. Sometimes I see the gun entering the room. It is smiling and has come from a different world made of materials I don't understand. When it calls you with its steely music, how can you resist its metal grip grazing your skin like another hand warming yours? Oh, clasp of friendship. Promise of grace. Now, brother, no more blame, no wishing to turn back to the moment when the barrel pointed you toward a sunlit arena, a bidding, an awakening in your brain. I was actually, when I wrote this poem, I was coming back from a reading in Brooklyn where Joan had read, and as the subway comes out and goes over the East River, the sun had just set and the lights were so gorgeous. So that's where this begins. The train speeds. The train speeds above the East River, lights from bridges, cars, apartments, an onslaught of red, green, and gold, such stars of the heavenly earth exploding through sooty windows. Once, on Dad's boat, we all jumped off and swam to the beach, then back against the current, and I saw you tiring, frightened, and swam with you till Dad hauled us on board by our wrists, cold and dripping. It's that moment of panic and weakness that finds me sometimes, and then the lights go out and no buoyancy, the train slipping underground again in Manhattan. These days, I accompany the dying as if I'm not traveling the same distance, as if I could hold myself apart as I do now from you, no longer waiting for you to catch your breath, treading, 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 dear brother. Two more. My brother speaks of dimensions. Not paradise, not a stacked universe, hell below and heaven above, no winged things, no standing in clouds, no arriving at a new place for all eternity. Don't worry about where I am. Maybe I'm in the no place, the not death, my old life, a photo quickly taken and dropped to the ground. You, my last witnesses, you still bound and mystified in flesh. Why do you never speak of me? Why not tilt your head up? Try to find me riding in my airship with that view, that stunning view of things. a list for my brother on the other side. My coffee cup picturing mammoths, 2 scurrying lizards I almost stepped on but didn't. Last night's full moon blazing toward Venus and Jupiter, a pearl dove pacing. Today I take a different trail to find you, to listen as best I can, imagining you are like the ghost particles physicists search for that have nothing to do with matter and yet occupy most of space. I tell you that age has gifted me a happiness that could only have come to me now. My blue window morning, the dog resting her head on my foot, and you close your eyes, nodding. Thank you for listening, for being here.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I really enjoyed the newer poems and the poems about your brother. It really seems like I feel like that you've reached another gear, if that's possible for you, but it's really, really wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you very much.
I now have the honor to introduce our next poet, someone we all know from this series. He's the author of 6 stellar full-length books of poetry. Phil Terman lives a luminous life of poetry, of poems. Aside from his wonderful work on this series, he is co-director of the James Wright Festival happening April 29th at Martins Ferry, Ohio. Philip's books have garnered heavy praise. His most recent book, This Crazy Devotion, is a home run hit out of the park. His work captures Jewish life in magnificent detail, right down to the old-style rye bread found at kosher delis, along with exposing essentials of life for everyone. Ilya Kaminsky implied Terman's poems pull readers into the moment, waking them up to a new consciousness. This sounds a lot like magic to me. So take it away, Phil.
Okay, Barucha. I think I'll go home now. Thanks so much, Anne Marie and Joan. Wonderful. I think I want to mention that next month is our last in our series, when we have amazing, again, stellar poets, to the tune of Jane Shore, Roger Kamenetz, and Alan Shapiro. How does that sound? And I think that's May 20th, I believe. But wow. So we've been really fortunate in our poets, that's for sure. So I want to read, so I'll start off with a poem from the Crazy Devotion. Tormented Meshuggahs. Where are the crazy sages? The ones who dervished across the hayfields and paused to yawp a parable to the cows about the 7 beggars, that tale layered like an onion. And when you peel it, you wail like the child you still are, wounded and wonderful. And where are the rabbis who wandered all over and off this world, measuring distance between our dreams and the stars, the ones who wrote the testaments, the commentaries on the commentaries, the interpreters, the ones who exclaimed, "You haven't seen nothing yet. This world is but a preparation." Those Meshuggahs. Summer harvest, we eat of the soil, basil into pesto, tomatoes into sauce. And our prayers, a little table talk, a lot of laughter, and the children inhaling their supper. Bodies bonkers with they don't know what, scampering across the field to the pond, searching for koi, jellyfish, frogs, dizzy with this, elated with that. And the next world, will we be greeted with white scarf and crown? Will we be invited to share in the feast? Will we speak the language that should have been our own? Will we reach a companionable silence? Oh, you so-called masters, disclose the secrets only you know. What the worms are whispering beneath the earth you bow your bodies toward. Enter our dreams and reveal the source of our yearnings. We move from the book to the garden, from the garden to the book. Now is the time to taste the fruit before it enters the fruit, the way God consulted the book before creating the world. Why look deeper than the garment of the moment? We want to read both testaments, the laws and the love, the patriarchs and the forgiveness, the silence that Buddha taught. We want the Dharma and the Java, the rebirth and the vegetable love. We're topsy-turvy for the duration, for our daughters placing small apples into the dog's mouth. See what I mean? It's like water, isn't it? It's like the dream we call our life. Go back to, let's see, okay. All right. I hear the birds out there, so that's cheering me on. Nice. They're not muted. Okay. This one's called The Famous Russian Woman Poet Termanovsky, though I found out she was Ukrainian, really. So I've changed the title to The Famous Ukrainian Jewish Woman Poet Termanovsky. I'm allowed to do that, right? If you found out your great-grandmother was a poet, if there was one obscure book you discovered one off day at the bottom of a dusty cardboard box in the corner basement room, covered up by pickle jars, slid behind your father's war uniforms, a volume so slim, small hand, the cover a faded blue, sealed with mold, pages tearing with a touch, letters in Yiddish, and there's her name, Termanovsky, your name, before shortened authorities, the way they'd slice off anything unpronounceable. Termanovsky, the famous Ukrainian Jewish woman poet, her dagger-type title-facing page, her face, the one you recognize from worn photos, but younger, a beauty, no babushka, a frilled scarf wrapped around the neck, her dark, thick hair flowing from beneath a tilted to one side beret, a few strands loose across her cheeks, dangling from her lips, a cigarette. She examines the strange letters, lines, and stanzas, wonders about the pressure of her fingers pressing the pen to the page, before the poverty and the pogrom, the praying for a relative to sponsor her over, the baking of the bread she had to peddle in the marketplace, having to worry about who would print and publish poems by a woman named Termanovsky about being a girl in the shtetl, the smell of herring and challah rising, horses and wagons in the open air, the mud streets, the learned huddled toward the eastern wall, old men in black coats, how it shamed her to have to sit on her side of the synagogue, even if she had the space, even if she had the time to save her moments in words, the way she kept buttons in a box and was assured of the support to write them all down. The key word in this poem is the first one, if you found your great-grandmother was a poet. And of course, I kind of made her up in the name. And I got this call from someone who was doing a Terman roots thing and want to know more, email, I guess it was, want to know more about this Termanovsky person. You know, I could have kept it going, I guess. So anyway, I'm going to move on to Cleveland, where I'm from and where I still kind of live and take the boy out of Cleveland kind of thing. Can't take Cleveland out of the boy. My father was a used car salesman, and I wrote a lot about that. Still do. I mean, Lois Simpson, the poet, wrote The Whitman's open road leads to the used car lot. So there's that. But this is just a section from this longer poem. And it's more about my Uncle Hi. Does anybody know Corky and Lenny's Delicatessen in Cleveland? No? Yeah. All right. Sherry, good job. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, it's highly recommended. Corky and Lenny's Delicatessen in Cleveland, Ohio. It's been there for a long time. And if you remember Cecil B. DeMille and the Ten Commandments, this is called A Cast of Thousands. My Uncle Hi was kind of an actor, kind of. My dad's kid brother Hi worked 14-hour days at Cotton Club Soda Factory through the Depression and the war, dreaming of stardom. 18, wavy black hair, 6'6", dimples. Everyone's head would turn when he'd stride like an undiscovered star through the double doors of Corky and Lenny's Delicatessen, where you would take a number and order the smoked fish, the lox, the spicy corned beef, the herring and wine sauce and sour cream, from the old women in red schmatas, speckled with vanilla splotches, faces patched with rouge and lipstick, wishing all the customers a mazel tov, and filling the air with their kibitz song, "You want I should slice the challah? What's the matter? Here you think it's not fresh?" And the clatter and clutter from the meat counter, and the kvetching in the corner booth, where the altar cockers gathered and kibitzed about the machers and the knackers. My father had his own parable about the man who was paid a ruble per day to wait by the Eastern Wall for the Messiah. "How can you work for such low wages?" they asked the guy. He replied, low wages, sure, but at least the work is steady." His brother, though, hitchhiked all the way for a role in the Ten Commandments. He played a slave, then went into real estate. Each year it appears around Passover, like Elijah, and we'd watch close. My father suddenly pointing to the set. "There he is. No, wait, there he is. No, I'm sure of it this time. It's him." All of us straining for the familiar face. He's still the one everybody asks about. Some days, when it's dark early, my father comes home from his used car lot, kicks the snow off, tells us how none would start, and it seemed his blood would stop, and we should all be in California. Yes, we should. So, all right, this gave me a chance to use a lot of the Yiddish I had. All right, there's more Yiddish to come though. So, all right, I got another poem coming. I get the page. Okay, all right, got it. I wrote the page numbers down, which was a good idea. I don't often have those. All right. We adopted 2 children from China, and this was written probably after the first one. So my Ukrainian Jewish grandparent, this is the longest title I have. Oh, it takes up half my time. The Ukrainian Jewish grandparents, no, my Ukrainian Jewish grandparents and the birth parents of our Chinese child meet at a cafe and discuss our child's future. Shmuel and Malka and our child's Chinese parents are sipping tea at a cafe somewhere between the Pale settlement of Russia and central rural China. They speak in signs and gestures, swirling arms like dancers, shaping fingers into figures, standing up and swaying, contorting bodies to emphasize some obscure point, even employing pauses and long silences to further the conversation. The men gesture. My grandfather's yarmulke is as black as I imagine our child's birth father's hair. The women continue to fill their husbands' cups and stare off into the distance. The men agree on the major issue. Each will have to sacrifice their darlings, their children, send them away, across miles of land and ocean, into a realm further and more unfamiliar than they could understand, even in their own tongue, a place perhaps like those faraway and never lands in the stories of each of their childhoods: palace on a cloud, temple beyond the stars, Jerusalem, or Shangri-La. It's better to think of that strange country this way than to ponder the potential dangers, strangers in strange lands, years of forced labor, the poverty and destitution they themselves know something about, each in their own way, these farmers and peddlers, each of them know dark to dark. Their gestures are more subtle and sophisticated now. They even forget and sometimes break out into their Yiddish and Mandarin, which sounds as exotic as a gathering of multicolored birds singing through the tea's steam. The bill, which is grief, arrives. They agree to split it. They accompany each other to the gate that opens out into their separate centuries. Through unfathomable signs, they gesture to meet again. Okay. Those poems, Anne-Marie, of your brother was just totally unbelievable. I think everybody knows that. Wow. And it reminded me of my brother. And I wasn't going to read this, but I'm going to, one section. My brother died. He was a cancer scientist studying cancer and trying to find a cure for that and other diseases. And he died, and most unfortunately, in a very silly accident when he was jogging. And it's almost his yahrzeit. In Jewish, we say yahrzeit to the anniversary of his passing. So I want to read just one section from a longer poem called "To a Scientist Dying Young." And I'll just read one section from it, called "What We Own." I followed you down the switchback trail of the Grand Canyon, and we slept in a crevice, and we own that. And we own those moments tossing the football in front of 4073 Wyncote Road until the streetlight snapped on. And we own the smoke bomb the cops threw at us and a few thousand others at the Jefferson Airplane concert, Akron, Ohio, 1972. And we own the whole country we passed through, all the way to the ocean, where we checked into a hotel and you discovered, lying atop Gideon's Bible, a black film container's worth of weed and half a pack of rolling papers, and we smoked it, and it was good, unbelieving of our luck, which we own, and the lunar landscape surrounding our tent in Big Bend, Texas, and the stars, so clear we could read by them, and we did. And we own The Godfather, Part 1, on that big screen of the packed theater in Evanston, Illinois. And we own that fear when we were lost in the Tennessee woods into the dark, and you followed some analytical instinct until we found, lo and behold, a road, and Bob Dylan, who was ours, and Joan Baez, who was also ours, singing "The Times They Are A-Changin'" in the War Memorial, and watching the Indians, miracle of miracles, beat the New York Yankees at Yankee Stadium during the 1995 heat wave. That too, that victory was ours. And I remember how quiet you sometimes were. And I asked you about it. And you said it's a feeling. You don't know how to explain it. And I'd like to think we own that feeling, how we bested the myths. We didn't become murderer and victim. We didn't cheat on the other's birthright. Oh, my brother of the other world, my brother who perhaps will greet me when I arrive at that place prepared for by our Father, who is now joined by his own flesh and blood, which is not blood, which is not flesh, but bones, and perhaps spirit, which we believe in, like the moon or the unpredictable Cleveland weather, or the way the snow descends on the fallen leaves, or how the sun glazes them now for their moment, stirred in the slight wind, the same wind that blew the Jerusalem dust in our faces, which we own. I'll just read two more poems. I'm working on a new thing, and a manuscript. I think it's going to be called The Whole Mishpucha. And Mishpucha is Yiddish for family. And this is for Gerald Stern and Millie Terman. Clearly a Jewish soul was out hunting mine, Stern said in his hand-scrawled yellow-lined note. I'm reading the day after he died. Born in 1925, same year as my mother, who said, we breathed, we were Jewish. You both had the Depression and the big war and Eisenhower's Great America and houses of ticky-tacky and lunch counters and Vietnam and that beautiful tragic president and the radicals and that Meshuggah, Tricky Dicky and all the nuclear mishuggahs to look forward to, both Polish, Ukrainian, both commanded by the laws of the same wild God who never leaves us alone, Stern and dirty Pittsburgh, Millie and dirty Cleveland, both poets, Stern a macher, a real landsman, Millie a abyssal shtick with rhyme at bar mitzvahs, weddings, Stern with a little more Yiddish a cup, and Millie a whole shebang of Heimish, both haranguing me not to be a putz, but a mensch, at which I failed, my soul on the loose for atonement, wondering why I haven't written a poem about Jeremiah, who every Thursday at 2:30 visits our prophets class, and in our cracked voices we kvetch the bad news to the Philistines, the Moabites, the Ammonites, warning that every head is bald and every beard is shorn, and the Edomites, progeny of Esau, whose renouncing of his birthright marked him and his descendants. And when I give a hearing to the plea of the needy and not judge the case of an orphan, I can drink the fruit of the vine with Jerry, and especially with Millie, who, New Year's Eve in Jerusalem, drunk on Manischewitz in the King David Hotel, hoisted herself up onto the bed and danced and lifted her full glass and toast, not to Jeremiah, that bullfrog, but the whole mishpucha in that holy city, finally. Okay, just do one more. Okay, yeah, let's see if I can find it here. Since I was on the theme of Jerusalem, my wife's mother's church walks to Jerusalem every year. It's a long walk. But this poem will explain it. Thanks so much for listening, all, and it's such an honor to read with you guys, Joan and Anne-Marie, and thanks Baruch and Katie. Get to thank people now. Thank you all. This is great. If you have any questions, by the way, feel free to ask. Now I'm acting as host. Walking to Jerusalem. Pedometer attached to her belt. Your mother, spry and strong at 90, joins the other Methodist church members in calculating the 5,915 miles, no matter the weather, to add up all the way to Linesville, Pennsylvania. From Linesville, Pennsylvania to Jerusalem. They need not worry about miracles or pausing at the sign of the cross. They need not stop for security to check their purses for weapons. They need no visa, nor baggage, no money to exchange for shekels, no guidebook, no guide. They need no ancient tongue or prophecies. They are simply, day by day, walking, mile after mile, from the sink to the table, uptown to the post office, down the block to visit the sick neighbor, Sundays to and from church. And when they walk far enough, adding their pedometers together, they will arrive in Jerusalem, and they will keep on walking. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Baruch.
Thank you. This reading series owes a great debt to you, Phil. Thank you.
Well, you too, Baruch.
I'm lucky to have you as a co-host and co-organizer in this endeavor. It's been wonderful, and I hope we continue to
I
be
think we
wonderful.
should. What do you all think?
Yeah.
Do this again next year, maybe?
Maybe next year in Jerusalem.
Next year at Clarky's and Lenny's, maybe. Let's all meet there.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And
So,
we would never even have a ghost of a chance of doing this without Katie and the JCC at Buffalo, who are amazing. And just thank you. I mean, you do everything we can't do and more.
yeah.
So,
All right. Who's up for a question? If you guys don't have a question, I have one, but I'd love to have the audience participate first. I feel like the teacher sneaking in to fix the class. If I ask the question, I'd much rather hear from you guys, but I have no problem asking a question.
oh, go ahead. What the heck?
All right. Okay. So this is for all the poets.
You didn't wait very long, Baruch.
Okay, I'm sorry. What do you mean? You said go ahead. Hey,
All right, go ahead. Go
you
ahead.
said go ahead.
All right, Baruch.
You
what do
got me. That was a trap, Phil.
That was a trap. Yeah.
It was a trap.
What do you got for us?
Okay, I have a important question, I believe. So much poetry is focused on the Holocaust and so much literature in general, yet there is currently a dearth of knowledge about the subject, especially among the younger generations. Therefore, does the Jewish poet of today have an obligation to rectify this matter? Furthermore, is it possible to keep the topic fresh in our poetry or literature?
Okay, Joan. Anne-Marie. No, you're not going to touch this one. Well, I'll say what I said earlier when we yeah, any historical thing like that is, going to inspire poetry, I think, even though Adorno said, but they always sort of misread this, that he said no poetry after Auschwitz, but of course he didn't really mean just that. But there's a second generation, there's a third generation. We're writing poems about all kinds of historical explosive events that, yeah, I hope so. I mean, we hope so, even though statistics say that there's a huge percentage of folks that, especially maybe younger folks, that don't know much about the Holocaust. So that is worrisome. That's a worrisome thing. So, I think it's like anything else, it's in danger of being forgotten. And we hope it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a scary world where it could be forgotten, because it's not really that long ago, and it's so unique of an event. And we have had great poets write about it. You have Primo Levi, Paul Celan, and others. So it has been written about, but I think the younger generation, maybe a solution is the younger generation of Jews themselves researching it and writing new poems on it. Maybe that's something we need to do in our poetry workshops, where when we have younger poets, try to turn them in that direction if we're comfortable with that. It's hard to kind of say, oh, go write this poem about this tragedy. It's not really something that's done, I feel like, in poetry workshops, but maybe we don't have a choice.
The questions you're asking really have to do with education, and poetry can't make up Poets can't make up for what's not being taught. And in a number of states now in our country, they're not even, allowed to teach it. So it's,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point.
And I was thinking something similar. And also, I mean, what is the poet's, what part of Tikkun Olam is the poet's job? And I think it involves really facing our own depths and writing what for us is the hard poem. And I think, I don't know, for me, it's a mistake to think of poetry primarily in terms of its subject matter, although that's certainly a way that we talk about poetry and think about it. But
Yeah.
I've written that one small poem about, because I was so moved by the story of a poet on a forced march that he knew was going to end in his death, having traded bread for a pencil and writing poetry, just before dying. But I don't know anything about the depth of personal experience. I mean, I love going to hear, the remaining Holocaust survivors who are still out there talking and teaching. And I was talking about encountering Picasso through Life magazine. It was, whether it was Life or not, I know it was Life magazine, though, where I think I was about 6 years old when I saw on a relative's coffee table that issue of photographs of the liberation of Buchenwald. And, we're all saturated with it. And I don't know what to do or to feel about a country that's now censoring books. I mean, I don't know.
books, subjects,
Yeah.
whole populations are being censored.
Yeah, it's awful. It's just terrible. The words equity, diversity, and inclusion can't be used in Florida in a public school. So when we have that, maybe it's incumbent upon us I think you're right, Anne-Marie, about the education. It has to, everything has to do with that. Everything.
Mm.
Or we're doomed to repeat the history. And I think I agree with you too, Joan, about what we do find what seeps through us personally. And we don't say, well, prescribed to write about a particular subject that we have to write about, but maybe if it's in the air, if it's being talked about, if it's going to somehow move us, perhaps. And if it does, then we need to approach it. I think I do anyway. I think we could all speak personally. Anybody else can chime in, by the way, I think, if anybody wants to.
I'd like to say on that in Poland, on a positive note, 2 days ago in Poland, thousands of young people marched in remembrance of the Holocaust. And there's only 3,000 Jews left in Poland, when originally there were 3 million. And this march was an incredible march. And most of the march were young people who obviously weren't around. So that's a positive note, that young people are aware and taking part in remembering the Holocaust. So it's not all bad news.
Where so much of it happened.
And especially when so few Jews are left there.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Holocaust Remembrance Day the other day, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
That.
Okay. So Phil, let's remind them of our next reading. You have the
That's fine.
details in front of you, because I don't.
Yeah, May 20th, I think. Roger,
Yeah.
who's in the middle of my screen.
I think it's the 18th.
18th. Thank you, Katie. It's just going to be an incredible reading with Roger Kamenetz and Jane Shore, wow, and Alan Shapiro, 3 of my favorite poets. So there you go. So hopefully, we'll send out some reminders, and if you can make it, that would be just wonderful. And it'll be our last kind of swan song. So looking forward
For
to
this
that.
season at least.
Season finale, yeah.
Showstopper is what we're gonna have.
Yeah, so I will send out a follow-up for all of you that joined us today. I'll share the link of the recording tonight, and again, our readers' websites, and I can actually send those one more time out in the chat tonight. And then the date for the next final reading, as Phil just mentioned, May 18th, and you will just need to register again, and you'll be sent a new Zoom link. Hopefully you guys all can join us again. And I just want to thank again Anne Marie, Joan, and Phil for reading, and Baruch for your lovely host job, and to everybody for joining us tonight. It was definitely a wonderful night of poetry, and you really shared some very personal poems this evening. So I appreciate you being so open to sharing everything. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for spending
everyone,
time with
for
us.
coming.
Beautiful night. Thank you.